You should call it this.
Yeah.
Poor guy. Because of other names.
So, well, we'll get started since we have at least a quorum of people here.
Yeah.
So, and we'll see when everyone else shows up. So, we are live streaming. I even have the live chat going. I don't know if anyone will. We'll see. Hopefully no one types anything because I won't be looking at it. Eventually I will be. So, let's stand and pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Most gracious Lord, send the grace of your Holy Spirit upon us, granting us intelligence and strength of soul, so that we may be attentive to the instructions which we are about to receive. May we grow to glorify you, our Creator. May we be a joy to our families, and serve the Church throughout our lives. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So, thank you all for being here. So I already gave you guys some of the things. So I'm going to hand out, this is just a subset of what will go in tab 2, and then I have another handout. And then if you want this one, Jessica, you can take this one as well and populate that. So this will tab 2. And so I'll talk through what I handed out a little bit, but we'll kind of go in a certain order. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the first handout you have. So these are two different longer quotes from St. Paisios, who is a modern saint from Mount Athos. And he was a chanter, and we have, I think, some recordings of him chanting things as well. But he has some strong things to say about lots of things within the world, about language, about music, about iconography. He just knew a lot of those things, and we have them written down because they recorded his sayings. And the one thing, when it comes to learning Byzantine chant, one of the things is, first we need to know what it means to be a chanter. And so if you look down at the fourth paragraph, where it's bolded, he talks a good bit about chant and about the turns of Byzantine chant, so it's very profitable to read the entire thing. But then he says, by contrast, authentic Byzantine music pacifies and soothes the soul. True, authentic chanting is the result of the overflow of the inner spiritual state. So that's a chanter right there, is someone who is overflowing in their inner spiritual state such that it goes to the entire congregation. The chanter's goal and role is to somehow cultivate an atmosphere of prayer, and that's not something that you can just turn on and off. That's not something that you can somehow be like, oh, what are we going to do today? We want to cultivate an atmosphere of prayer. It has to be an overflowing of the internal state. And so if we're somehow not prepared in that way, spiritually, then what is our poor worship, as some of the prayers say? It's not going to be profitable to those in the congregation. It's not going to take them to where they need to be. They may be moved, but are they transformed? And that's kind of the key question. So he has a lot to say there. And one of the key things that I think is important to nuance is that he's not talking about being very, puritanical in terms of chanting and being like very simple. He talks about all these turns in here and how to do the turns of the music correctly, and that people don't know how to do them because they don't know tradition. So it's not about removing ornateness from it or removing certain melismatic phrases. It's about how do we do them and what is our internal state such that those melismatic phrases transform the listener and transform the participant, that type of thing. And then if you go down to the second quote on the second page, these are from two different books. I bolded, in chanting and iconography also, reverence was more important to the elder than technique. Hello. Yeah, have a seat. So it says, in chanting and iconography also, reverence was more important to the elder than technique. And he talks a little bit before that about how do you get, ordain a priest correctly? And it's about those who are reverent and pure. It's not about someone who's a good administrator. It's not about someone who preaches really well. It's about their interior state again. And a certain way of reverence. And the word reverence he's using here is very specific in Greek. And we can always talk about that. But just leaving it at that, that's kind of where we have to start. So this goes in tab 2. Okay. So that's kind of a place to start, is that when we're learning Byzantine chant, in as much as we are learning Nipavu and we're learning symbols and things like that, and he talks about that, if you just chant the Nipavu, that's not good enough. And if you just chant the Nipavu without an internal spiritual state that is somehow peaceful and compassionate and kind and loving, then it's just music at that point. It's not true chanting. So if you go to the third page, which you should already have open, this is just the list that I made, both for myself, but also when I was teaching at different music institutes, prayers that are good for the chanter to memorize, or at least be familiar with. And the reason to memorize them is not for, to somehow have them under your belt, but rather to be so innately familiar with them that they become our prayer, but also so as we're going through the books, it's also practical that when it says, "Oh Heavenly King," we're not like, "Oh no, what is that prayer?" And we go scrambling to find it. And some of the books do just say, "Oh Heavenly King," and then they don't say anything else because the assumption is that you know it. But by learning them, not only can we use them much more fluently, it becomes our language, it becomes the way that we talk. And St. Paul says, to talk to each other with psalms and spiritual songs and all those types of things. Well, if we don't know any psalms or spiritual songs, we can't really do that very well. And it's always funny when you do a quote from a psalm and it just goes over people's heads because they don't actually know what you're talking about. So, "O Heavenly King, the comfort of the Spirit of truth," that one, "Holy God, all Holy Trinity, our Father," that is not one prayer, that is 3 sets of prayers with linking phrases in the middle. I've heard many chanters, unfortunately, say, "Holy God, all Holy Trinity, our Father," and then finish. So that's not what it is. It's "Holy God, Holy Mighty, Holy Immortal, have mercy on us," with the interspersed things. Then you also have "Come, let us worship." It is truly meet with more honorable than the cherubim. So those two together are just good. "Lord have mercy" 40 times. The major thing there is not that you hopefully know Lord have mercy, but how do you do it 40 times? And if we want to talk about that, we can. So
Besides,
yeah, counting it on your hands is not really it's very, that's kind of anxiety creating, because it's like, oh no, am I going to make it?
Yeah.
And so there's ways to use patterns to get there. The dismissal of the service. I was actually at a funeral and then with a bishop at some point, and the priest at the funeral just looked over and he was like, "Do the Trisagion prayers," and it was like, okay, and so like if you didn't know what that was, that'd be a problem. But then also with the bishop, he was like, "Finish the service correctly," and and then so I just finished the service with the dismissal, and then he didn't say, "Do glory to the Father both now, followed by Lord have mercy 3 times, then Master," he just said, he just looked at me, he was like, "Finish."
You do what you have to do.
Yeah, exactly. And then you can read the rest there. The Creed, I believe, O Lord, and I confess, the pre-communion prayer of St. John Chrysostom, Psalm 50. If you're looking in the Hebrew Bible, Psalm 51, just used all over the place. How to do a Psalter Kathisma reading, O Gladsome Light, which oftentimes in the Byzantine tradition is actually spoken most of the time, 90% of the time. Same with Lord, now let us thy servant, spoken normally by the priest. That is spoken, but in the Russian tradition, it's not. The small doxology, and then also I put in italics prayers before and after meals and common and festal dismissal hymns, because they're not really a part of the liturgical cycle, but they're part of our own liturgical cycle about how we live our lives. And it is very convenient to have them memorized, both because many people don't, and then you get to a meal and it's kind of like, we should pray. We should say something. And so it's good to actually know what the church kind of has prepared, because the Orthodox Church, we're very prepared. We have things for everything. We have prayers for blessings of beehives and things like that. So there's fun things there. And the common and festal dismissal hymns, eventually if we sing them often enough, that's how I know a lot of them, is that you just sing them, and you sing them throughout the entire feast, and which is 8 days generally. And so by the end of the 8 days, you're like, I got this one. So there's some that we all probably would know, like, "O Lord, save thy people," but other ones, the Nativity of Christ, the Annunciation, all those types of things, Pentecost. So those are good to learn. So any questions on that? That's just kind of preamble. That last week we chanted a whole bunch of things, and now we're kind of backtracking. So that was like class 0, like introductory, and this is actually where the class starts. And then on the next page we have a quiz, which is not necessary to do anything for any right now to anyone, but just questions to ask ourselves, because oftentimes we read things but we don't actually remember them, or we don't actually internalize them. Christ says, those who have ears to hear, let them listen, and that's a different thing, is hearing versus listening. One is active and one is just, it goes and it goes away. But listening is an active thing, and the same with reading. So, who are the saints of today? We have 2 major ones, right? Anyone?
Saint Susanna and the Queen of Serbia?
Oh, we have of Georgia.
Oh, Georgia. Yeah.
Georgia, yeah. Saint Susanna, Queen of Georgia.
Friday?
For today. For today, Thursday. Yeah.
For today, Thursday.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have Susanna, who I wasn't even thinking of, Queen of Georgia.
No.
And then the other 2, anyone? No. Yeah. We have Hosea, the prophet Hosea, right? And then we have
They want to cheat.
Andrew,
Andrew.
of the judgment, Andrew of Crete, but of the judgment, right? Or of
Chris.
Croesus, yeah. This is for tab 2.
All the same day. We just haven't to
Oh, I just.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's essential to read those and to be familiar with them because they're our family, And so if we don't understand their lives and their the kind of the structure of what they do, one, we want to understand their hymns because the hymns just hint at things. They're like, when you did this, like the hymns of St. Andrew, they were just talking about Copronymos, and they just didn't tell you anything about it, but it's like, if you actually read his life, which we did last night, it was, you learn a lot more about, who Copronymos is and what is the problem with that.
And why that was such a huge thing that he basically talked against Coponius or Marco's face.
And then the same thing with just being aware of what the epistle is, what the book is, and then one notable thing from the epistle, what the gospel book is, and one notable thing from the gospel, just to be aware, just to kind of quiz oneself every day. I don't do this every day except when I teach, and I wish I would do it every day because later on I started to do it where I'm like, I read the gospel, I read the epistle, and it was about Christ and his disciples. And so the question is like, well, what do I remember what it was yesterday or today or and so we want to make sure that everything is lived in a very intentional way. So one notable thing from the epistle today is that we have a lot about slaves and how a slave should be a true slave, and that the master should be a good master because he's also a slave of Christ in the same way that the slave is the slave of Christ. And very striking things to, I guess, our modern ears. We're like, no, stay a slave, just be a very good slave and convert your master in a certain way. And then we have a kind of a little bit about, Christ going to Jerusalem for his passion. His eyes are set on Jerusalem now. So we have a little bit of a change in terms of the joyousness of the gospel. It gets a little bit bittersweet in the way that the gospel does. So that he's looking towards his crucifixion. So those are just some notes on what it means to be a chanter and things that hopefully, like next week, I will probably ask, who are the saints of the day and what is the epistle and what is the gospel and what are some things from it, just to keep ourselves on track, So, because this is the life. This is to be aware of it and to know what tone it is. And I was reading the epistle once, and the bishop, our bishop, Nathaniel, he paused me in the altar, and some of you may have heard this, when I had the epistle book in the Russian tradition, so we're holding it, and he puts his hand there, and I kiss his hand, and he holds on to it, and he doesn't let me go, and he's like, what is the tone of the week? And I was like, it's tone 1. He was like, what week after Pentecost are we? And I was like, this week it's 18, right? And I was like, 18? He was like, what is the epistle from? And I was like, Ephesians, and, or Galatians or whatever it was at the time. Yeah, and then he was like, all right, and then he let go. And then our subdeacon Eugene at the time, afterwards he was like, I don't think I would have passed. And he looks over, he was like, how did you know that? I was like, I don't know. Like the night before, I was like, oh, look at the calendar. I was like, 18th Sunday, cool, okay, nice, And so I don't know what would have happened if I got it wrong. Like, would have been like wisdom, and it's like I'm still on the altar, I don't know what would have happened. So, God knows what would have happened. But it was good. It was good that I knew. So, so just be aware that a bishop may stop you and just ask you, what was the epistle of today? So, as they are wont to do. So that's a little bit of introductory there. Any questions on that? Hopefully that's pretty clear. So just if you don't have anything memorized, that's not to condemn anyone. It's just a kind of not a wake-up call either. It's just a thing that kind of a bolstering statement. It's kind of like let's all be in this together. So
it's a goal.
Yeah. So and I was listening to Father Pat Reardon last night, and it was like you have a lot of the Psalms memorized, and he was like, yeah. Yes, I do. But it was just kind of like, well, because I pray them. He was like, I don't have them because I didn't sit down to memorize them. I sat down to pray them, and then I happen to have them memorized. It's just convenient. So that type of thing. So, cool. So we're going to talk a little bit about Byzantine music after that. So we talked a little bit about what a chanter is. Let's get a little bit into the structure of Byzantine music. We chanted a bit last week, and now we'll back up a little bit, look at the music, and then we'll chant a bit more. So the music that we have, if we look at it, you've got a few different things. So what we have is, let's say we have a bunch of symbols, and they do something, but we have to know, these symbols don't tell you where you are, they tell you where you're going. And so they tell you to go up one or stay the same. So this is kind of your roadmap. And so then this is what I would call a relative system. And I asked a few questions last week, to kind of think about relative versus absolute. If you look at Western music, you've got, 5 lines, and then you know that your note is right here, and that should be an A. And then you know that this is an A and how long you're going to hold it, and you know exactly what you're doing. Here, I have no idea what this note is. This says stay the same wherever you were. This says stay the same based upon that one. And so you have to work your way back. And so this one, I have no idea unless I work my way back. And then maybe I look here, and then this tells me I'm knee. And so now we can kind of work through this, and we can say, okay, this is knee, this is knee, this is paw, this is knee. Oh, that was easy. Now we're back on knee. And then this tells us where we are. And as I mentioned last week, that these are called your martyria, so your martyr, your witness to the music. So this is what is kind of your signpost. This actually doesn't have any value. It doesn't have any quantitative value of time. It doesn't tell you to go up or down. This just tells you where you're starting and where you're ending. In the same way that martyr will point us towards Christ. This points us towards the music, and it doesn't serve itself, it serves the music. And so the martyria is just witnessing to what we should be doing at that point. And if we're not there, this is the opportunity to correct ourselves, to get, to pick ourselves back up, to repent of our wayward ways, and to get back to where we should be. And so that's kind of the martyr's goal, again, is to kind of pull us back and to kind of give us that splash of cold water to say, they died for Christ, and that's the least we can do is something much smaller. So this is our martyria, and then at the beginning of this, and I might call this the note marker or the martyria, and then in the beginning you also need to know where you are, and they'll have a big symbol that might say knee, and then they'll have a bunch of other things. So this is also a martyria at the top. It's just more what someone would call a mode marker or a tone marker, so it tells you what tone or what mode you're working in. This is what tells you what note you're really on. So they serve very similar functions, but a little bit different just functionally. So it's a little bit there. And then we have the words underneath it. So we have one line of music, and we have one set of words. In contrast, oftentimes with Western, you might see multiple notes, with the words really low, and you've got 5 lines. It is actually really taxing to sight read for 2 hours of Western music, just new stuff. It's really taxing, especially if it's very melodic. Byzantine music is actually rather easy because you've got one line, and you've got one music, and they're kind of sitting there together. So you have very little to look at. So the words are there, are there, and then this will be zo. So, and I'll show you why I'm doing this now. So let's say we have Lord have mercy. If you look in English, in different languages, they'll write things differently. English, just for anyone that's not familiar with music in English, if you want to extend the word, Lord, we have a long line. So this tells you that you're just going to hold Lord for a while, except if it's in the middle, in which case you put dashes. And the way that the words are broken apart is based upon the dictionary. So wherever the dictionary breaks the words, that's how we break them up. So if you look at something, it might be broken in a weird way, which you might not expect. That's because that's how the dictionary breaks it up in terms of syllables. And then just be aware of these underscores and then the hyphens. Greek actually just keeps replacing, if you had Lord, it'd be Lord, and then you have O, and then keep giving you O until the end of the word. We can't do that in English because this would be lo, and they would say, well, I want to chant this in some way. And so what you ended up having is that they might have a little symbol, they're I want to do that, I want to go down, and then I want to do this thingy, and then do that. And they would just write little notes above it as how I want to do this. And so there's a certain style of chanting which is very simple called ekphonetic, and it's just kind of off the words. But if you want to chant with a melody, you might make certain notes to myself and say, I want to go, Lord have mercy. So I might do something very simple, but say I want to go down and do something else. And then eventually this gets more complicated, and then eventually it's well, Patricia and I want to chant together, so maybe we should codify. I'm going to write this, and this will mean this thing. And then eventually there were hand signals involved, so that's where you get some of these. It's a little hand signal that's kind of like a claw. And you have other ones which you might be able to see how hand signals come into play. So you chant as a choir. If people can't read, now you can do hand signals. So all this ends up coming together to end up having a little bit of music right above the words, which is eventually comes into Byzantine notation over many years. And then eventually it was simplified because to become a proficient chanter took about 25 years to do so. That's because everything was very compressed. So this note might mean a whole phrase, which is a bit challenging. You gotta be aware of all these things. So eventually it started simplifying things, and in the 1800s, they had reformers, in a good way, I think, to actually simplify this and make it a little bit more codified, such that 5 years, of 100%, this is your job, this is your job in school is to learn how to chant. So, every day chanting more and more and more. So we're meeting once a week, over 10 weeks. So there's still a lot to learn after that. But they did 5 years, very intensive study, and then you become a master of this. So that's just kind of a guidance there of where it's going. But things got a good bit simpler. But if you look at the old style notation, it's very similar. But again, you've got 2 pages for a triplicam that in modern notation is like 4 or 5 pages, just because it's so much compressed. So it's very convenient. I want to say no one can really read it. Some people can read it. I don't know how faithful they're being to what it truly is, because it's kind of like historians when they look back and they're like, well, this must be how it was. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's accurate. It just means that they have a pretty good idea of how things work, but there's some nuances there. So you have some recordings, like Capella Romana has recordings of old notation. A lot of it ends up sounding similar because they're interpreting everything the same way. We don't actually know. I don't know if we have certain linkages to the past, which we'll talk about eventually. Karamanis is one of them, who is like old enough that he actually lived during the old notation and the new notation, so he's kind of one of the linkages there to help us interpret things. But way back in the day, back in St. John of Damascus, we don't know. But this is the oldest organically developing tradition of music. So in as much as it may not be exactly the same, it's organically developed over all those centuries. So it should be somewhat similar. So any questions there? Kind of an overview. Cool. So now let's chant some things. So if you go, I think, to that next page, it should say rhythmic phrases. So this will be very simple phrases. So we didn't look at too much of rhythm last week. Last week we really did just, every note gets 1 beat. And we looked at like kind of 6-beat phrases. And we just kind of went up and down a little bit. And so if we look at these rhythmic phrases, we're going to have very simple intervals, because I don't want us to focus too much on the intervals right now. But we're going to introduce a little bit of rhythm just to make it more exciting. Because without rhythm, it's not so exciting. So let's look at number 1. So if you recall, we have ni pavuga di kezoni is our scale, and we'll look through that again more. But right now, let's just do ni pavuga di gavupani. So let's sing that together. So ni pavuga di gavupani. And in your your cheat sheet at the beginning, if you need to look at ni pavu, or I see some of you have it written, which is great, because just to be aware of what comes after what. And I can also write it on the board if that's useful. But I think it's the 3rd page of the cheat sheet. Yeah, this one. Yeah, so with all your ni pavus. So feel free to take that out and then have it available to be aware of what you're chanting. But we're not going very far. We're just going ni pa ni right now. So let's look at number 1. We'll do some on la, we'll do some ni pavu, because la is helpful, but ni pavu eventually will be very, very helpful. So number 1. Ne agie 1, 2. Ni pa ni. Cool. So simple. So far we didn't go very far. If you notice, most of these we aren't going to go very much further than that. Number 2, though, introduces something that we haven't seen before. If you look over the 3rd symbol, we have a little sideways apostrophe, right? And we'll look at this a little bit further. This is something called klasma, K-L-A-S-M-A. So klasma just adds a beat. And so if we look at this, essentially, we've got a symbol, and so it's, what's it on? Is that an oligon? Yeah. So we've got an oligon with a little sideways apostrophe. And what this ends up meaning is that we'll say we go up, but then we're going to tie it to an ison. So this becomes 2 beats. So 2 beats. This is 1, this is 2. So they're just tied together. So now instead of being ni ni pa pa ni ni, now we've tied those two middle ones together. So now it's ni ni pa ni ni. Does that make sense?
No.
So
Ni, and you said this is plus two?
it's going to be 2 beats.
2 beats.
Yeah, so we add a beat to it.
Add to, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Ni.
Ni ni pa ni ni. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're just going to hold it for an extra beat. And we'll do this a bunch, so I think you'll see how it works, hopefully. We've got a bunch of different iterations here.
Okay.
All right, so number 2. Ni ni pa ni ni. And if you can, tap the table with me just to make, so let's do number 2 again. So ni ni pa ni ni. Nice. Number 3. So now our klasmas on the first one.
Ni.
Exactly. So 1, 2. Ni pa pa ni ni. Let's go to number 4. 1, 2. Ni ni pa pa ni. Nice. Number 5. Now we have 2 klasmas. Don't be afraid. Just get enough breath. So 1, 2. Ni pa ni ni. Number 6. Ni pa pa ni. So we can put klasmas wherever. They can be on a big symbol. They can be on a small symbol like an apostrophos, that little claw guy. So let's look at number 7. It's going to be a little bit boring, but for now we'll leave it there. So number 7. 1, 2. Ni pa ni. So now, with something boring, the Byzantines would want to do something with it. We won't do anything right now, but what you'll learn over and over again is that the music, it's guidelines. It has ni, pa, ni. But what they would probably do is ni, pa, ni. You just somehow do a turn, you do a little ornamentation, a little interpretation of the music. So you read between the lines, and eventually you read between the lines with a tradition. With right now you'll be following the Maya tradition, which is kind of amorphous. It came from so many different locations. We'll be following very specific ones, but it's traditional. It's just not specific in terms of Thessaloniki or Athens or a certain place. So they would do something different, such as a foretaste of things to come, that we won't just sit on a note. We'll do something with it because we need to take up space with something. So number 8. Do we have any holds here? Nope. So neagie 1, 2. Ni pa vu pa ni ni. Nice. So now we add vu to that. So let's go to number 9. Ni pa vu pa pa. All right. So what is our final symbol there? It's got a pi symbol, right?
Yes.
Which is pa. So we go from ni to pa. So we made it. Ni pa vu pa pa. So let's do number 9 one more time. Ni pa vu pa pa. Nice. Now number 10. What is our last symbol here? We're going from ni to ni, right?
Yeah.
And so we go ni pa vu. And we have to get back to ni, right?
2.
Yeah, so this one is our jump down 2, which is alafron. And as I mentioned last week, there are 10 up and down symbols. Last week, I think we learned 7 of them. So we learned
We get 9.
yeah. So, what was it?
9.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we learned a lot of them. So there's a good number. So we're getting very close to learning all of them, and then it's just combinations after that. So this one we're going to jump down 2. It's like a little jump. So number 10, 1, 2. Ni pa vu ni. number 11, now we have 3 holds, so we've got 3 plasmas, and we have a jump in the middle, right? So we're going to jump up 2, and then we're going to jump back down 2. So 1, 2, ni, vo, ni. Cool. Number 12. So we've got to jump again, but now we're not going to have a jump down. We're only going to have a jump up. So number 12, 1, 2. Ni, 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 vo, pa, pa. Over time there. Ni, 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 vo, pa, pa. And remember the symbol there that we have for going up. We've got this guy, which could also be written this, but when we go down after it, it gets written like this. So for convenience, it's written like that. So be aware that these are both the same thing. This gets pulled underneath if we're going to go down after. So if you look, we have our apostrophos at the end, our down one symbol, and that tells us what we're doing there. So ni, 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 vu, pa, pa. So the more that you see these things, and I'll keep pointing them out, just because if you get used to the patterns, eventually you can start jumping over them, because you're like, I know what I'm going to do. So it gets easier and easier as you learn the patterns of the music. Let's do number 13. So now we have 2 holds. So 1, 2. Ni, ni, vo, pa. Nice. Now number 14. Yeah.
It's a new symbol.
We've got dots.
Yes.
So this is not chicken pox or anything like that. So
Or eyeballs.
yeah, or eyeballs. So so this is something. So these are actually different symbols. These are not quantitative, so they're not telling you where to go. They're telling you how long to hold things. So this is different. So I'm going to erase a little bit. So what I was doing there was to make everything, I believe, 6 beats. So if we look at this, we should have 6 beats there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we only got 3 symbols. And we know that the last one is how many beats?
2.
2. The next one before it is 1. So therefore, if this is going to be 6 beats, the first one's going to be 3. So we've got a symbol plus 2 dots, right? So this is how this is going to work. So if I had an apostrophos, this is 1 beat. If I put a dot, now it's 2 beats. If I put 2 dots, now it's 3 beats. If I put 3 dots, now it's 4 beats. So this is 1 beat by itself, so 1 beat, and then each one of these also adds 1 beat to it. Similar to the way the plasma works, so the plasma, will add 1 beat to this guy. But you can't put more than 1 plasma, that just wouldn't look right. It just, I don't know, it would look weird. So whenever you do more than that, a bigger hold, you end up using the dots. And for an apostrophos, a down one, you will see 1 dot. That's a perfectly fine thing to do, because this is a small symbol, and that's a small dot. So that's okay. If I were to have an oligon with a dot, that just looks awkward. Mm-hmm. So you'll see it in certain contexts, but very rarely will you just see it by itself, where it's just oligon with a dot. There's always a reason for that dot, whereas this you will see all the time. So this one, you'll see it in very specific circumstances, but not as often. So there's ways to use this. So right now we have, what was it, an Ison? Yeah, Ison with 2 dots. So how long is this? 3 beats, yeah. So we're gonna play around with that. So there's different ways to hold things out. And now if we're holding it for 3 beats, we're gonna interpret. Not today, but at some point in the future. Because anytime you hold it for anything longer than 1 beat, even 1 beat sometimes, you still interpret.
Now,
So.
musically, what would be the difference between, say, having the 2 dots underneath and just writing out 3 E songs?
So the only reason you would write out 3 E songs if you're gonna say ni, ni, ni.
No.
When the Lord went to, as opposed to when the Lord. So you're just holding it out.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, I think we had something similar last week where it's like, why would you do it this way, not this way? And why couldn't you just tie them together? Because there is another way. You could just tie the 3 sounds together,
Right.
but then you end up taking up lots of music, lots of space.
Uh-huh.
And everything about Byzantine music is really condensing the music such that you can see a lot within one eyeful.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can condense it all, which we'll see more of that today, we'll see lots of condensing, you can just get it shortened down to a very small space and still have a lot of information there. So let's look at number 14. Neagie 1, 2. Ni vo pa. So not too challenging there. Let's do number 15. Ni pa ni. Now 16. Ni pa vo. Is anything going to change?
There's a comma underneath. That's new.
That's still the same plasma that we saw. It's just on the bottom now.
But it's not a telephone. It's a different one.
Different from you.
Yeah, so this is petas-D, right? This just says go up one. So this is still going to be ni ni pa ni, right? So, but there's a nuance here. So what we have is we have a petas-D, and then because it would look weird to put the plasma on top, they just put it on the bottom. But now, this one, if you remember from last week, this one doesn't just mean go up one. This one means go up one, plus one. This one means go up one, but in a stressed fashion, not anxiety stress, but in an intentional ni, pa, ni, give some emphasis to it. And so we're going to add an articulation to it that is important there. There's different ways to stress this. The easy way is just to put an emphasis on it. But a traditional way is just a flutter that we talked about last week, a little vocal undulation. And so when we do that, ni, pa, ni, pa, ni, we just flutter within that time. The interesting thing here, and we looked a little bit about fluttering last week, is that this is essentially a petas-D tied to an E sound, right? So now the question is, how do we flutter something that's held, ni, pa, like how do we do our flutter there? And what you actually will do is you'll flutter into the next note. So ni, pa, ni, pa, ni. So that's the way that we'll do it in this class at least. There's different ways to do that. But we're just gonna flutter and almost like a grace note into the hold. So this one, even though we're holding it for 2 beats, ni, pa, ni. Does that make sense? So we're going to flutter into the second beat. And if you listen to other people do it, you might hear ni, pa, or you might hear more fancy things. The more you know, the fancier you get sometimes. But this is a very simple, very traditional way to do it. So we're going to flutter into the second beat here. So let's do number 16. Neagie 1, 2. Ni, pa, ni. One more time. Let's flutter. Ni, pa, ni. Cool. Make sense? Pa. So that's where the snapping comes in, because then you can pa right into your snap. So let's do number 17. So there's nothing new here. So we're going from ni to ni. We've got 2 holds, so it should be pretty simple. 6 beats again. So 1, 2. Ni, pa, ni. A little bit of syncopation. Now number 18. We have something new, right?
Yes, this gone.
We have a dot. We know the dot. What does the dot mean?
Beat.
Yeah, it means a beat. So we're gonna do something with a beat, but we have a little swoopy guy.
Mm-hmm.
So what we're gonna do here, this symbol, and I'm kind of introducing a lot of these things in a different way, kind of not out of order, but you'll see a lot of these in music. So when we start looking at music to learn more, I don't want you to be confused by these different symbols. So this symbol by himself is a stress. So varia is what his name is called. So varia. And I have a lot of these written down in other things in your packet. So varia, if I put him right here, ni, we just have a little emphasis there. You might do some sort of interpretive thing. So this is going to say stress the symbol, right? So this ends up getting an emphasis added to it. But what if I do this? Now I'm stressing a beat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when we stress time, it's a rest. It's a pause. So this is our rest, 1 beat rest. So we're essentially stressing time. So we're not getting stressed during the time, but we're stressing time. So this is a 1 beat rest. Now if I do this, it'll be a 2 beat rest. If I do this, 3 beat rest.
Example. Can you say it? Give me an example.
So we'll actually chant it in a second, but like if I were to go ni, pa, ni, so we'd actually pause for a beat, or a ni, pa, that type of thing. So the one thing, just be aware that if I have an apostrofos with 1, this is 2 beats, right? Because this has 1 beat, this has 1 beat. You add together. This is 1 beat, because this stress doesn't mean anything. It's qualitative. It just tells us how to do something. It doesn't tell us what we're doing. So we're just stressing time. So it's just 1 beat because you don't have another symbol there to add to it. So does that make sense? So now let's test it by doing it in music. So number 18. So 1, 2. Ni, ni, pa, ni, ni. Nice use of space. 19. 1, 2. Ni, pa, ni. Nice. 20.
Okay, mean like a stop. When is that stop?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, in Western music it's called a rest, but yeah, just a little stop in the music. Just don't sing.
Good.
So
Time to grab a breath.
yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So number 20. 1, 2. Ni, pa, ni. Yeah. So simple so far?
Yeah.
Cool. So those are a bunch of rhythm to give us a little bit more excitement in our music. So now let's move on to another thing. So what you have next, the tone 1 verses.
First one.
So now we're going to start to combine a bunch of these things that we've already seen. So in Vespers and in most of our services, we have lots of psalms. So the verses of the psalms will be interspersed with hymns. So these are the verses of the psalms that we would sing in between hymns. So what we have, I've given you verses 1 through 6, I think. Yeah. And so what we're going to do, these are sung in a certain way, and we'll work a little bit through that. But right now, we're just going to use it as simple ways to read music. So there's nothing too terribly complicated here, and they kind of are repetitive. So bring my soul out of prison. We've got a lot of Isans there, a lot of stay the sames. The one thing that is worth noting is that you'll see some symbols in music, and the way that I'm teaching this, if anyone has watched anything online, I'm teaching this a little bit more focused on music, so we can start by reading things as much as we can, and then as opposed to just exercises and just doing lots and lots of exercises. So we will do exercises, but I think reading music makes it seem more obvious and connects more to our liturgical cycle. So in this case, we've got Isan, but then we also have some which have a little bar underneath it, an oligon under there. Mm-hmm. Normally, oligon, right, by itself means go up 1. Mm-hmm. In this case, it's just there for support. It just makes him a little bit thicker, So it adds a little bit of emphasis. So not a whole lot, not as much as a petasti. This has a good bit of emphasis. This is just, bring my soul out of prison. Prison, the emphasis is on pri, right? So they would put prison, just to make sure that we give a little bit of an emphasis, just a little push. Yeah, just a little bit there. And then you'll see other things where the oligon is there just as a qualitative symbol, just to tell you how to do it. But the petasti does the same thing. So if I do this, this is stay the same, but emphasized a lot, and with some sort of flutter as well. So then we have a stressed ison. So this is ways that we're going to start combining symbols together to give different qualities to it. So we could stay the same, but what if we want to do a little bit heavier, or a little bit heavier than that, or do different things with it? So we're going to start bringing some of those in there. So if you look at verse number 1 here, you'll see that we have our klasma on soul, bring my soul out of prison. So we're going to emphasize a little bit of pri, and then that I may confess thy name. And so we're going to emphasize may a little bit, and we're going to start on pa. If you look at the top of the page, right, it says first mode, and then right underneath that it says a bunch of Greek words, and then it says has a pi symbol with an alpha next to it. That tells us what our starting note is going to be. So it's pa, and so ni pa 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 di ga vu pa, and then at the end of our phrase, at the end of verse 1, we have a little triangle, right? So the, yeah, we're going to be, it's our delta symbol, right? That's the symbol for delta, and so then that's going to be our the. So pa vu ga di ga vu pa. So we're going to end there. But we'll do a bunch of these, so don't worry too much about it. The other thing that's worth noting here is that there's a few other Greek things that I'm going to hopefully demystify a little bit. Is that you have this little chi symbol in the music. So this one, don't get too worried about him. Chi has kind of a sound to him. And what this means is chronos. And if we know anything from like watches and things like that, this has something to do with time, right? And so chronos is how we're keeping time. So it's telling us what we're going to do. And so what you see in the midst of the music, we actually have tempo markings, and we'll learn them later. But you'll see that like one might be this, another one might be this, and you might have different ones. One's going to tell you to go fast, one's going to tell you to go slower. And as we look into those, we'll learn them. But right now, I'll just tell you that at the beginning of the phrase, bring my soul out of prison, we're going to go really fast, kind of talky, bring my soul out of prison. And then right after that, we slow down a little bit into almost a little, that I may confess thy name, a little bit of a fast walk maybe. For us, we'll do it a little slower, but that's where those come in, is that we're going to start fast, and then we're going to go back into meter. So the first part is not really in any meter. It just kind of, bring my soul out of prison. You know, I'm just telling you. And then, that I may confess thy name, in the tempo of the music, which the next hymn is, accept our evening prayers, O Holy Lord. And so we just have to know what our tempo is going to be. And the verse starts it, because we want everything to be kind of unified in its structure. So hopefully that's not too much. Just a little hint of things. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Let me
Cool.
ask you a question.
Yeah.
Now you said this, the chronos and the ga over it, that will be long or will be short?
I'll explain those in the future. Yeah.
Okay.
So for right now, just know that bring my soul out of prison is fast. And then right after that is going to be a little slower and going to be metrical. Yeah, and we'll go through those at some point. That gets into probably, maybe next week we'll talk about those. You know,
It's okay.
it gets,
Your time.
that's probably the most confusing part about Byzantine music. So, and so just a reminder on soul, that's our up 3, right? So pa vu ga di. So all these go from pa to the, because pa to the and ni, like anything that deals with 3 notes up is a very important thing to Byzantine music, and we'll talk about that at some point. So pa di. So let's sing verse number 1, pretty slow. We'll do it metrical right now because I want us all to do it together. And then let's do it on ni pa vu, and then we'll do it with the words. So, so 1, 2. Bring my soul out of prison, that I may confess thy name. I said ni pa vu, didn't I?
Yes.
Yeah, you guys got off easy this time. You know.
But you started it.
Next
man.
time,
You
next
started
time.
it.
Let's do it one more time, just for me.
For me now, me?
What?
Start with me?
Yeah, so pa ananes, pa pa li ga ga vo ga li. Cool. So pa di ga vu pa. So we're only dealing in that little phrase there. So it gets kind of boring when you just do these. The. So I like the words on these, but let's do back to the words for verse number 1. So, Ananes, bring my soul out of prison, that I may confess thy name. Cool. Let's do it a little bit different. So let's do the first part really talky. Bring my soul out of prison, because now we know how it goes. And then we'll finish it in meter. So, bring my soul out of prison, that I may confess thy name. Nice, and that's our tempo for our next hymn. So that's how most of these go, is with a da 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 da, and then we finish it.
So is this repeat just to make sure?
Yep. Name.
Okay.
Yep. 1, 2, 3, off. So let's do verse number 2. So let's do ni pa vu. Pa. Pa thee, 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 thee. Ga thee, ga vu, ga, ga, thee, thee. Nice. So don't get too confused with the these. There's a bunch there. So now we're gonna sing it with the words. Does anyone remember what the symbol on reward? Right, we've got 2 little slashes on reward me.
Yeah.
Anyone remember what that is?
That +1 and that like emphasize.
No, it's actually the opposite. It's
unstressed.
Yeah, unstressed. So we're gonna slur into that. So that symbol never gets a word. Generally, I'm gonna say never, except there's one instance where it does. But that's for like you. Many years from now, never in a parish, probably, at a monastery somewhere. But yeah, so it's unstressed, and then it's a slur, and so it doesn't get a word, and it's always on the second beat of things. So that's just how it works. That's that one. So we would go reward me. So we're gonna slur into it. So verse number 2, Ananes, with the words. The righteous shall wait patiently for me, until thou shalt reward me. And the Byzantines like slurring things and like scooping and like all these things. So it's not ward me, ward me. They will slur and they'll smooth things out. I might do some ornamentation there too. I will try not to do too much ornamentation right now, but nevertheless, there's lots of Western rules that at least I grew up with that Byzantine music breaks them all, which is great. It's very freeing. So don't do whatever you want, as long as it's within tradition. But there's lots of cool things you can do.
Do the 2 slashes always mean you slur up 1?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So let's do number 2 again, but fast. And then back in meter. So all together. The righteous shall wait patiently for me, until thou shalt reward me. Nice. Let's do number 3. So just be aware, at the end of the line we've got a jump, so don't be caught off guard. So it's a little bit different than the one we just did. So ani pavu in meter. Pavu ga thee, 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 ga. Oh, sorry. Thee, ke, ga, thee. I forgot what note we were on. So one more time there. Pavu ga thee, 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 ke, ga, thee. Ga thee, ga vu, ga thee. Surprisingly hard to do ni pa vu when you're just like repeating it over and over. I'm like, okay, I lose where I am. So let's do it with the words now. Out of the depths have I cried unto thee, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Nice. And let's do it a little faster. Out of the depths have I cried, and then we'll slow it down on, oh Lord, hear my voice. Na. Out of the depths have I cried unto thee, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. Nice. So now, what we learned last week also, and this is kind of where we'll finish it up because we're slightly out of time now, is that you see on one of the notes, we looked at this a little bit. We've got a little swoopy guy underneath. This is Psi-Fiston, so don't worry about that for now. But it's P-S-E, Psi-Fiston. And that one is a scoop, a slur up. So if you notice here, oh Lord, oh Lord, Lord. So we're going to scoop up to it. And so you can do different things with it, but out of the depths have I cried unto thee, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. And there's other things that you do with it, if you hear what I'm doing. But there's like a little lilt, and then you kind of come down, and the way that I liken it is almost like Wile E. Coyote when he's like, when he runs off the cliff, and then he's like, uh-oh. And then then eventually he falls, but there's this initial point where he's like levitating there, and it's, oh Lord. Like there's this little lift, and then you fall. So, not too far, but not as far as he did. So, cool. So let's do number 3 again. So.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
How is that different than the 2 slashes?
So this is a scoop up to the note, whereas the 2 slashes is a slur up one. So, the way, let's say, if we were to do that, well, you couldn't do words on the 2 slashes too, but if I were to take out Lord, let's say, out of the depths have I cried unto thee, O Lord. Oh, hear my voice. Oh, that would be your 2 slashes. But this is, oh Lord. So this is like a scoop up to the note. It is up one, but we're going to scoop into it.
Okay.
So that makes sense or nuances it enough. So let's do verse number 3 one more time. Ananes. Out of the depths have I cried unto thee, O Lord. O Lord, hear my voice. All right. So you've got verse number 4, number 5, number 6 there. For the sake of time, if you guys know how to read them there, there shouldn't be anything that's too surprising there. Yeah, there's no special meters. Look at number 6. We've got lots of words there. For thy name's sake have I patiently waited for thee, O Lord. My soul hath waited patiently for thy word. My soul hath hoped in the Lord. So it just has a lot of words there.
Did we go over under mine, the elephant with the apostrophe?
Oh, we didn't look at that one yet. So just the final thing, just as a foretaste of things to come. So we know this guy, right? Elephron. He means -2, go down 2. And we know this guy. He means -1, apostrophos. So now, imagine if Elephron ate the apostrophos. So now you got 2 and 1.
-3.
-3. Yeah, so now it's just math. So that's not actually a new symbol. It's just math. So there are other things. That's like a dinosaur imagery. This could also be that somehow it's going to give birth to an apostrophos, or there's different things. But yeah, so this is -3, and you can start adding things like that. There's limits to the addition. So this is, you don't want to be looking at the music and be like, oh no, 2 + 1 + 3 + 5 times, and be like, we don't do that. So it's very simple and very methodical. But so this one just means down 3. So because of the way the music is, we're doing a lot with pa and thee, right? Pa ga thee 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 ke thee thee pa. So we go back from thee to pa. That's down 3. So we're going to do a up 3 and down 3 a lot in tone 1. That's just how it works. So, and if anyone's curious, we'll talk about it later. But that's called a tetrachord, because you've got 4 notes, pa vu ga thee. So they combine together, tetra being 4. All right. So that's kind of where we will stop, except I want to give you something else. Yes. I think you know everything here.
Verse 4, we cannot pick up verse 4 next time. Next week.
Yeah, we can pick up verse 4, 5, and 6. There's things like, in your time, if you have any spare time, just look at it, be like, I got this one, They shouldn't be too challenging, except for that new little symbol. And so then the other thing is that here's a little self-test. This is not for me to grade it. This is just for you to play around with things. And if I haven't said anything yet, this is not for you to do now. This is just to look at in your free time. So the self-test. Yeah. So this one, section 1 just says, what are these symbols? Look at your cheat sheet, get the answer, say what they are, both in their name, but also what they do. So you should have learned all of those so far. Again, look at the cheat sheet. This is not a matter of, memorizing them yet. Write down the notes of the scale. Again, your cheat sheet has those, ni, pavuga, dike, zon, ni. What does the apostrophe mean? We haven't actually talked about that yet. So feel free to skip that one. And then how many parts does Byzantine music have? You can notice those too. And then 6, when practicing music, there's a characteristic phrase, which we'll learn eventually, which is either 1,000 times using note names and then once using words, or I've heard like 1,000,000 times. I don't think that's appropriate. But 1,000 times, or it's just emphasizing that when you're actually reading real music, ni pavu, ni pavu, ni pavu, because it internalizes what the music actually is in certain ways that just going straight with the words can't do. So that's one of those things. And then on the back page, you've got a little practice phrase that you should know everything. Actually, you don't. Let's wait on this until next week. So give it back to me, because you don't. There's one symbol you don't know yet.
I do.
It's not hard,
Can
but
I still do it?
you could. Yes, you can if you'd like to.
Which one?
So,
I think it's this one.
Yeah, I'll.
This one?
Nope. So I'll explain it next week. So since we ran out of time, if I had 5 more minutes, I could explain it. But yeah, it's a unique concept. So you guys are off the hook. So just look at verse 4, 5, and 6, because those we actually are good. So
No, I know the symbol.
yeah. So we'll talk about the rest of that. Just making sure that I cover all my stuff and that I don't lead you all astray. So any questions before we finish?
Nope.
All right. So let's finish with prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. We thank you, our Creator, for you have bestowed your grace upon us, enabling us to be attentive to our lessons. Bless our families and lead us into what is good, and grant us energy and strength as we continue our studies. For you are holy, always, now and ever, and unto the ages of ages. Amen. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So which one is the Byzantine saint? That's the patron of the musicians.
Yeah. I assume that like Saint Romanos is a good one. Saint John of Damascus.